I have been looking and adding some combinatorics books to my selection of books. I do feel like it's going to be a really nice next subject after abstract algebra. Although 20% into Galleon, I've got a long ways to go in abstract algebra, so this could be like a really long-term thing. Either way, I was very curious about this book by Van Lint and Wilson. I'm going to talk a little bit about Brualdi because I'm going to compare the two books a little. But I've shown this book before, so really, this book, this video will be titled to this specific book. So what about it? So this is a Caltech book. These folks taught a course in combinatorics at Caltech. Yeah, second edition. The thing that I really like about the book is that it's a pretty good survey of a gigantic field. Combinatorics is massive. It's interesting that I haven't done any combinatorics in this channel so far, 4 years in, because yeah, if you're looking at the pie of mathematics, the combinatorics slice is pretty big. I mean, if you look at the preprints, combinatorics is number one. It's got the most preprints. So it just goes through all the basics of all of combinatorics in a really high level. I think being a book that was taught to Caltech students, it really is a good survey of the entire field. And I believe the authors when they say that if you go through this whole book, you will be able to understand the basics of most of the combinatorics literature, which I think is fantastic. But that comes at a price, and we'll talk about it as I go through the book. So I'm taking my time to pause so you can read all the sections. I'm not going to read them, but as you can see, it's just like little bits of every single field, getting you as close as possible to the research literature for combinatorics. So there's lots of mentions of theorems. Tons of theorems are mentioned. There are no answers in the back. The font is pretty big, actually. I think this book could easily have been printed in maybe like half the pages. It could have been like a 250-page book. It looks big just because the print is massive, which is fine. And as always, I'll pause so you can read the front matter at your own leisure. So yeah, they took over for Reiser, and Reiser has a book. I may try to get it. Reiser taught this same course, the Math 121 course at Caltech before. They took it over, and then they wrote a book for it. That's basically it. Yeah, so looking over the book, what I see is a book that's going to be hard for me as a self-learner. They stated somewhere in here. Well, number one, it's got tons of prereqs. Requires abstract algebra. That you should know. So unlike the Brualdi book, which is kind of like an early step, I think this would be a second book for me, if it ever will be. But yeah, groups, finite fields, elementary number theory, linear algebra for some topics. And of course, they say it somewhere in here, this is really a book for somebody who has a professor. And I'm glad they said that, because I don't. Yeah, so the reading through the book, it feels crunched up. It feels like if this book was rewritten for babies like me, it would have double the content of examples and the basics and worked out problems. It doesn't really have a lot of that. I mean, when I read through the problems and I read through the material, I'm like, oh, I know that's going to be hard. It just feels that way. It just feels that way. So this is the type of book that if I ever were to do it, I would do it with like another 7 books. It feels a lot like Baby Rudin, frankly. It's intimidating and exciting at the same time. It's challenging and worth praise, but at the same time, you're like, really? Do you want to make it that painful for me? Yeah, the proofs. Yeah, I mean, hard for me to tell at this point in my journey with combinatorics, and I usually have sucked at it. But it does feel like it's tight, very tight. The way that Baby Rudin reads, every word matters, and it's easy to get lost. I would say that. I think this feels to me like the kind of book where it'd be easy to get lost. It's got great references, but it's got references to a few books, a very small number of books, all of which are very, very specific to that topic. So it doesn't have a lot of references to general combinatorics books, which I'm much more interested in, and a lot of journals in the literature. And I don't have an academic library at my disposal. But if you do, just the references in this book are worth the book, because it basically is some of the, some two people who are good at combinatorics giving you like the greatest hits. So really all these references at the end of the chapter of each section, I mean, I hate to call it chapter, it's more like galleon where there's a bunch of small sections. You can see that, I mean, it's got like everything in the field, like all the major papers that really found things are mentioned at the back of each section. Yeah, all these references. But unfortunately, there's not enough baby book references. And that's something that I was much more interested in. But again, if I ever were to do this book, as I said before, it would definitely be a second book for me, done with 3 or 4 other books ready for me to pull in when I got lost. And yeah, so it would be difficult. This would be a difficult book for me as a self-learner to go through. But just like with Baby Rudin, there is a prize at the end. Yeah. Yeah, it's very tight. Latin squares, which are in abstract algebra. And I think they mention a book. There is a book on Latin squares. I've actually looked it up. A book just dedicated to Latin squares. It is not listed here. Yeah, it is not listed here, but I have seen the reference somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah, so there you have it. That is Lint. Now, I'll compare a little bit the table of contents to Brualdi, and you'll see what I mean by the intimidation factor. So in the case of Brualdi, it's just the basics of combinatorics, pigeonhole principle, permutations, combinations, inclusion, exclusion, some graph theory, some networks, and ending up in polyaccounting. And it's got a lot of baby material. It really does. And it's got answers in the back. So definitely this would be like my first combinatorics book. When you compare it to this book, as I showed before, yeah, this is more like, hey, I'm going to go hard on combinatorics, and you're going to see like where all the major players are, all the major theorems, where are all the areas, what's everybody working on, and what are the basics that you need to go and if you start reading those papers, you can actually get a feel for them if you work hard enough to understand everything in this book. Then that's good.